Hey guys, I'm back, and today we are talking about this little beauty right here, which I shall be buying a hard copy of because it is beautiful. Like, the cover's beautiful. Y'all know I'm a cover whore. Like, the cover's beautiful, but like also the book is beautiful. It's wonderful. I love it. Definitely 5 stars. I could not put it down. Like, I would go to bed and be like, I wonder what Ren and Harper are doing. I love this book so much. So, the main characters are Ren and Harper, and the point of view switches between the two of them. And I would argue that Gray is another main character because he's so prominent in the story and prominent to the two main characters. So it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I mean, that's what they call it, but I would probably say it's very loosely based on Beauty and the Beast because, first of all, there's no library. Okay, and we know without the library, there is no Beauty and the Beast. Okay, I'm just saying, we all know what the priority is in that movie, and it's the library. No, but really, there's no library. And also, how do I put it? To me, it's more fleshed out and more developed and a deeper story than Beauty and the Beast. And nothing against Beauty and the Beast. I love Beauty and the Beast. But this is a much deeper, more fleshed out story. Brigid Kemmerer did an amazing job. Amazing. I love this freaking book. Okay, so review. I told you 5 stars. I could not put it down. So Ren the Prince is also the Beast, and Harper the Beauty. So Harper has cerebral palsy, and if you're not familiar, cerebral palsy is something that happens during birth, like something goes wrong and it causes damage to the brain. And so cerebral palsy can be very mild, where somebody only has a limp, or it can be very pronounced, where somebody is in a wheelchair and unable to walk and has cognitive difficulties. So cerebral palsy, like, it's kind of like autism in that it's a wide range of how mild or severe it can be. And so I love that Harper has CP and it doesn't affect her. I mean, it's a very mild part of the story. Like, Harper is a freaking warrior princess who does what she wants and needs to. So Ren's kingdom is cursed, right? And because he ticked off a witch. And Harper is kidnapped from modern day Washington, D.C. By his one and only remaining guard, Gray. And of course, to break the curse, she's supposed to fall in love with him. And he's tried like 300 plus times and failed. So, and that's kind of like a theme throughout the book, is Ren's failures, or his perceived failures, because Ren actually is a good guy. He probably wasn't, which is why he ticked off the witch, but now he's a good guy. So, Harper does her own thing and gets Ren out among his people, among Emberfall, that's the name of the kingdom, and they kind of... Ren, Harper, and Gray basically changed their world. And there is, oh my God, the character growth in this book. Like, y'all, I'm just like, ooh, I love it. So there's this wonderful character growth in the book. Character growth for Ren, character growth for Gray, character growth for Harper. And then there's also growth of the relationships in the book. So the relationships between Ren and Harper, and Ren and Gray and Harper, and Ren and Harper and everybody else in the story. So it's just, it's so good. It's so wonderfully written. Like, seriously, if you haven't read it, read it. Also, and no, it's not free, but like Amazon was having one of these deals where it was like, if you spent so much, it's like sometimes Amazon will be like, oh, if you buy $25 in ebooks, you get a $5 credit. That's my co-star Louise back there, by the way. And so that's when I bought this book. And I don't think it was that expensive, but I will definitely be buying a hard copy because I loved it so much. And we get a great ending. I can't say it's a happily ever after because some things are hanging out there in the ether. I'm drinking my tea, y'all, because it's in the morning and I'm a book nerd. that I got at a Polycon, I think. So, that's the review. Love it. Go get it. Read it. Time for the recap, aka spoilers. All right. So, Ren has just woken up to start a new season. So every time he on his 18th birthday, right, is when this started. And every time Gray kidnaps a girl from the other side, which is DC, and brings her back, and Ren fails, and when he fails, he turns into the Beast, and then a new season starts over after whatever happens. So Ren's just started a new season for the 327th time. Harper is in DC with her brother. She has cerebral palsy, and she's her brother's lookout. Her brother, Jake, has to work for Lawrence, a loan shark, aka the mob, to pay off their dad's bad debt. And their dad is gone, right? Like, he, for whatever reason, took out money from this loan shark, ran off, or something happened to him. We don't know. We don't find out. And they basically came after their family, and so Jake agreed to work for them to pay off their dad's debt. Okay. So, while she's waiting for Jake, she sees this man with this woman, and then all of a sudden the woman's unconscious and the man is carrying her, and she's like, oh, hell no, because what if it's like some freaking psycho serial killer, right? So she grabs a tire iron and like attacks him, and then they end up in the castle with Ren. Because I guess Gray can only go over for us, like, I think he gets 1 hour or something, basically, to find a girl to bring back. And so, since Harper kind of volunteered herself by accident. So, Ren tells Gray, get off her, because they're fighting, because she's beating him with the tire iron. And so, they're fighting when they show up, and Ren's like, get off of her. And she hits Ren and then runs off. She makes it to the stables and gets this horse named Wheel, who's actually named Iron Wheel. And is off, right? She's escaping. She's doing the thing. And then Ren whistles and the horse slams on brakes and comes running back to Ren, and she ends up with her butt in the dirt. So the way Brigid explains why she can ride, because she did therapeutic riding as part of her therapy for her CP. So they go back to the castle, and he locks Harper up in his sister Arabella's room. And later, Ren is sparring, because the point of view switches. Ren is sparring with Gray when Lilith, the witch, enchantress, whatever, mage, shows up, and she's the one who cursed him, shows up and tells Ren that this is his last season, because he's just so, like, melancholy and forlorn. And she's like, well, if it's that bad, this will be your last season. And by the way, if you die, you really gonna die. Because previously, like, he had tried to kill himself and stuff to get out of the curse, and he just wakes back up and starts a new season. So this time she's like, if you die this time, you're really dead. So Harper decides to escape, and by climbing down the trellis. And I don't, if anybody's ever seen a trellis, the wood's like this thick. You're not climbing down a trellis. And so it breaks and she falls. She makes it to the stables to Wheel. There's a map in the stables, so she heads for the woods. And when she crosses some magical barrier, like the castle and the grounds are kind of enchanted. And whenever she crosses that enchantment, it's cold and snowing away from the castle. And the castle is like warm in springtime. So she sees a fire like off in the distance, and she heads for it. And when she gets there, she finds a woman holding a baby with 3 kids being held at sword point by a man. Yes. Sip my tea. So Harper uses Wheel to like barrel into him and knock him down. And when she comes back for the second pass, he grabs her off the horse, throws her into the ground. He's hitting her. She stabs him. Then more guys show up. Yes, y'all. It's like, okay. Then the woman, Freya, grabs the dead guy's sword to defend Harper from the other, like, 3 men or 4 men or whatever that's around. Then Ren and Gray show up and start peppering them with arrows, and they kill everybody but one who runs off. So they all go to the inn to get rooms for Freya and the kids. That's the woman's name that Harper saved, is Freya. And at the end, they meet Cole and his family. And he tells them, you know, basically what's going on in the kingdom and how much the kingdom suffers and the people suffer. And they wonder where the royal family is. So Wren tells Harper in private, when they're in one of the rooms, that the royal family was killed by the monster. But nobody can know, you know what I'm saying? Because then it would just lead to chaos. So Wren and the others are in rooms, and Harper's downstairs playing cards with Gray, and they kind of talk and get to know each other. And Harper asks about the monster, and Gray says that it changes, like, you know, it's always different. Sometimes it has fur and fangs, and sometimes it has scales and claws. And so back at the castle, Wren doesn't lock Harper in. He actually kind of respects her enough to not lock her in. And what does Harper do? Harper go wandering. Yep. And she finds a room full of blood and tissue all over the floor and begins screaming because she found a room full of blood and tissue all over the floor. And Wren comes and, like, carries her out and tells her it's his blood. And I wrote, what kind of tomfoolery? I did. Y'all think I'm playing? I really did. I wrote, what kind of tomfoolery? So Wren tells her about Lilith and how his grandfather let mages into their country and let them practice magic, but they had to pay really high taxes, right? Like, okay, well, you can come hang out here, because they were fleeing some other kingdom. You can come hang out here and practice your magic, but you're going to pay. So, they paid the high taxes, but then one day they send a girl, an enchantress, to try and woo his father. And so his grandfather orders all the mages killed, but one survived. And that one mage received all the magic from all the others. Yes. So then on his 18th birthday, that mage, aka Lilith, shows up and seduces him. I mean, I don't think, like, you can't say Wren was the innocent party, right? Because it ain't like she forced Wren. Like, Wren's like, hey girl, what's up? So, and when he sent her away the next morning, she cursed him. Like, when he was like, well, thanks for the fun last night, you can go now. And she's like, oh, sir, just wait. And so, he tells her about the castle being enchanted and the food and the music, because the instruments play themselves and the food, renews every day. Like, basically everything resets in the castle except for the people. Yeah. So it's kind of like this kind of tortured existence for Wren and Gray, because every day, everything starts over except all the people that have died, except for him and Gray. Him and Gray always come back. So, Harper gets an idea, and she loads up satchels with food to take to the inn. And when she's on the way to the inn, she almost runs into this poor man hauling a wagon full of cargo. And his cargo falls off the wagon, and she helps him put the cargo back on the wagon. Then Wren and Gray show up and are like, well, why wouldn't you just tell us? We would have helped you. And that's kind of a theme, and God knows I relate to this so much, because I am one of them people that does not like to ask for help. So I relate to Harper so much. They're like, why wouldn't you just ask and we would have helped you? And Harper's just kind of like, I didn't think about it, because I'm Miss Independent. So, Wren and Harper kind of argue. And then he sends her on ahead to the inn with Gray. And when they get to the inn, Cole tells her, because she's like, oh, I brought food for you guys. And they're just kind of like, why? Wren paid us for 6 months of food and lodging. And she's like, oh, I didn't know that. And so then she's like, oh, I just brought it for the kids. So Wren shows up, and they're just all kind of relaxing and hanging out when some men show up. And one of them is the dude that ran off from Freya's house. Yes. So these men show up, and they're basically like, leave this property. We're here to claim this property for Lurin. I don't know how you say it. Luran. And Harper bluffs and is like, well, I am Princess Harper from the land of DC, And if you don't leave right now, my father will have you executed. Gray, show him. And so Gray throws a knife and like hits one of them in the knee, and then they, you know, the guys drag him out and leave. And so Wren takes Harper back up to the room to kind of talk, and they kind of have this like moment, like Wren like brushes a lock of hair behind her ear or something, but then Harper like ruins it. So Harper heads for the stables, and Gray finds her, and she's like, hey, can you know, that was really cool the way you threw those knives. Can you show me how to do it? And so he does. And it's like, oh, yay, Harper and Gray are going to be friends. So then Lilith shows up and taunts Wren. And so he goes outside with Gray and Harper and tells Gray, well, why don't you see about getting some men as guards so that we can go out and see the people. So in their room, Harper's looking at, Harper's by herself. She's looking at she's got her brother's phone, because that was how she kept up with track of time when she was looking out for her brother. And she's looking through his pics of him and his boyfriend. And then the phone dies because there's no electricity in Emberfall. Yeah, and so she's crying. She's like sobbing, and Gray comes in to talk to her. And then Wren shows up, and Harper slaps him and shuts the door. And I said, well then. So Gray hands Wren his playing cards and says, why don't you just try and talk to her, basically. And so he does. He talks to her through the door and tells him everything that he went through with his family. And it's so sweet. And so she opens the door and hugs him. And I'm just like, oh, yay, they're making headway. She wants to see if Lilith will send her home. And he wants to kind of play into this whole Princess of DC thing and pretend that they're engaged as a potential alliance, and that the King of DC is going to send his army to save them all from Shill Shallow, Karis Lurin. Okay? So Harper's like, deal, and they shake on it. So Harper goes to bed, and then Wren and Gray talk, and they have a moment. That's what I'm saying. Like, I love the relationships in this book. So the next day, Wagon Guy, Jameson, shows up. And come to find out, so he was a lieutenant in the King's army, but he lost his hand. So Wren has asked him, because he's got a wagon, to take Freya and the kids to the castle so Freya can be Harper's lady-in-waiting. And also to distribute all the magical food, right? Because the castle resets all this food, and they could be feeding the kingdom, right? So the next day, Jameson is sparring with Gray, and Wren is watching when Lilith shows up, and she agrees to meet with Harper. So Gray goes to get Harper, and when they come back, Lilith has Wren on the ground and is like hurting him. He's coughing up blood, like, you know, it's not good. And Harper freaks out and takes one of Gray's knives and throws it and hits Lilith's dress and tears it. And with that, of course, makes Lilith not happy. And so Lilith cuts Harper's cheek, and then Harper kind of passes out because they give her some ether to knock her out so they can so they can stitch up her cut up cheek. So Wren is like waiting by her bed when she wakes up, and she's like, I'm still down. Let's do this plan. Okay. The next day, Freya is doing her hair, and, you know, she talks to Freya about her mom and her brother. And this is a quote from Freya. I love this quote from Freya. She says, I'm always surprised to discover that when the world seems darkest, there exists the greatest opportunity for light. Oh, Freya. So Gray comes to get Harper, and they're kind of talking, and he fusses at her basically for how she handled Lilith. And Wren gets on to him to give him to quit fussing at Harper. And they make it to Silvermoon Harbor, and they're just kind of welcomed into the city. And Wren is like buying everything up at the market because, you know, he wants to try and win over the people because they've been MIA for like 5 years. And so they get to the Bower stall. I guess that's how you say it, the person who makes bows. The Bower stall, and Harper asks Wren to show her how to use a bow. And so he's showing her how to use this bow, and the crowd is all into it, and it's like super cute, and they're kind of flirting. And then all of a sudden they get attacked, and by several men. And Gray is fighting like a darn devil, y'all. And so is Jameson, and so is Wren. And so they kill all but like one of them. And Wren orders Gray to kill that guy. And Harper asks for mercy. And Wren gives this really cool speech to the people and kind of rallies the people. And this girl, Zoe, who's a musician's apprentice, asks them about leading the dancing. But Harper says no. And then she asks about being a guard. And Harper tells her, yeah, come to the castle tomorrow and speak with the commander, Gray. So Harper is basically like, you know, why would you embarrass me like that to Gray about leading the dance? And Gray's like, why would you think I'm trying to embarrass you? I guess because of her limp. And so he storms off because he's mad. And so she comes to find him and they talk. And she says she hates dancing, but she'll do it anyway. And they sway. Like, they just kind of sway back and forth. And that's like their thing. That's Harper and Wren's thing. And it's so cute. So back at the castle, they're having a moment, but Freya interrupts. Freya. So then Wren gets back to his room and Lilith is there. And she literally tortures him all night with visions of like the Queen Karis's army killing his people, him killing his people when he's a beast. Like she tortures him all night. So the next day, when Harper finds Wren and Gray, they're sparring in the training arena, and Wren is basically taking his anger out on Gray, and Harper's trying to break them up, and Freya shows up and like, guys, there's a whole bunch of people outside. And they're freaking out, like they're thinking they're being overrun, and they go outside, and it's actually hundreds of people, and they're like cheering, and they have come to run the castle and join the guard and join the army, and it's just like, yes. So Wren goes to visit some town by himself because he needs to talk to this Grand Marshal and try and get his army. And Harper goes after him with Zoe. And they find a royal guard dead outside. And so they go inside and they find Wren and tell him what happened. And the Grand Marshal, which I guess is like the mayor or the governor or what, I don't know, claims he didn't know anything about it. His seneschal, I don't know how you say it, his second in command, says that he killed the guard to bargain a higher price for their army. So they kill the seneschal, whatever, and leave guards with the marshal to make sure that he sends the army like he's supposed to. So Wren takes Harper back to the castle, and she kind of guesses about Lilith, that Lilith's been torturing him all night, every night. And she asks him to stay with her to kind of save him from Lilith. And he's like, no. And she's like, well, you told me that you would never deny me anything in your power to give. So I'm asking you to stay with me. And so he does. And he stays every night with her. And it's like just so cute. So this is a quote from Wren. He says, she trusts me. I trust her. This feels more monumental than love. More precious. More earned. So then one day in the training arena, Lilith shows up to taunt Harper and shows her a vision of her brother with a gun to his head, and he has till 9 a.m. to pay back his dad's debt. So then she changes the game because she's losing. She knows she's losing, so she changes the game. She cheats, okay? So, and says that now Gray can cross over whenever he wants to. And so now Harper has to convince Gray to take her home. And so the whole thing is, right, Lilith wants Wren in love with her, and that's why she gave him this challenge, and that's why she taunts him, and that's why she interferes, because really she wants Wren to fall in love with her, which is never gonna happen. But so Harper asks Gray to take her home. He's like, no. And she begs, and he's like, no. And so she goes running off to her room, and she's crying, and Freya is comforting her. And Wren comes in and finds her and tells her that he's ordered Gray to take her home, and that he's going to give her money to pay off the debts that their father owes. So Harper like tackles him and tells him she's going to miss him, and he kisses her, and they start making out, and I'm just like, yeah, Hercules. But then she cuts her fingers on his scales. He's starting to turn, and he didn't tell her that he turns into the monster. Oh, no. So she's kind of like, why didn't you tell me? And she's kind of pissed, but then Gray shows up, and so she goes back to DC, and she's thinking about it, and they're talking about it, and she's like, you know what? Come back and get me in 24 hours. And so he says, okay, I'll be back at midnight. So Harper goes home to her brother and her mom, and then we switch back to Wren, and Wren and Gray are talking, and Wren asks Gray to kill him. He's like, this is my final season. Like, I don't see a way out of this war and this curse, and just kill me when I start to turn. And Gray's like, before you do that, Harper wants to come back. And he kind of has to have this, like, come to Jesus meeting with Wren to kind of get his head out of his hind parts. Because he's kind of being a little bit of an Eeyore. You know what I'm saying? So, Harper, we switch back to Harper. And Harper is by her mom's bedside. Her mom is dying of cancer. And so, her mom wakes up and they all kind of talk. And then her mom says some things. And then she passes away. Yeah. And so, back in Emberfall, Karis Lurin shows up at the castle and basically tells Wren that his people have 1 week to evacuate before she full-on invades, and that he's not the true heir. And then she leaves. And Wren tells Gray to take all the people and all the money out of the treasury and head south. Because he's up on the roof. Lilith shows up and he's like, Gray, take all the people, take all the money, head south. He stabs Lilith, throws himself off the roof. Yes. So Harper and Jake, her brother, are waiting all night, but Gray doesn't show up. So 2 days pass, and then Gray shows up at their apartment door, like all bloody from claw marks. And Noah, Jake's boyfriend, who is a resident. So a resident is when a doctor graduates medical school. So they do 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school. When they graduate medical school and decide what their specialty is going to be, family medicine, internal medicine, emergency medicine, surgery, whatever, then they go to do their residency, which can be 3 to 4 years depending on what they decide to specialize in. So Jake's boyfriend, Noah, is a resident. So he's a newly graduated doctor learning his specialty. And he's there, so they get him to stitch up Gray. So when Gray wakes up, he tells Harper that Wren threw himself from the ramparts of the castle, but changed midair into the beast. He's a dragon! I'm sorry, I really like dragons. So then Lawrence's men, Lawrence is the loan shark. Lawrence's men show up and they start shooting. So Gray shifts them back to Emberfall. Harper tells the people of Emberfall that Jake, her brother, is the crown prince of DC, and that Noah is the king's healer. So Harper she's talking to Gray, they come up with a plan. She's like, I'll ride out on the horse to distract Wren. You take the people and flee south. And he's like, I'm not letting you do that by yourself. No, we're going together. Then Jake shows up and he's like, Heifer, you ain't going without me. So they all decide that the 3 of them are going to ride out and try and distract Wren, while Zoe, her guard, the musician's apprentice, takes all the people south, right? That's the plan. So they find Wren. He chases them. Gray hits him with his throwing knives. He picks up Harper. And then she's like telling him, like he's got her in his talons or whatever. And she's telling him, like, please remember me, remember all the times we spent together. And she's, like, talking about all the time they spent together. Remember us dancing in the moonlight at Silver Moon Harbor, blah, blah. So he lets her go and, like, nuzzles her. And then Karis Lurin's horns sound. And he grabs her and shoots into the air. And, like, I thought, like, when he starts nuzzling her, I was like, yes. She's fixing to turn into the Khaleesi. She's fixing to turn to the Mother of Dragons and ride Wren into battle. And then he grabs her and takes her up in the air and drops her. And I'm like, what happened to all my carefully laid out plans of Harper becoming Khaleesi? But he glides underneath her and catches her so she can ride him into battle against Karis Lurin's army. But y'all was freaking out. I was like, he just dropped her. Homie just like flew her up in the air and dropped her. So Wren attacks the army and they're winning. And you're just like, oh, okay, yes, there's one problem down, right? But then Wren gets hit with a catapult and he goes down and Harper gets knocked off of him. And Karis's soldiers actually pin Harper to the ground with arrows. Yeah, they're kind of vicious like that. And then Wren's army shows up with Gray and Zoe and Jameson and everybody shows up and they win. Karis Lauren's army goes running. Gray is carrying Harper and she passes out. When she wakes up in the infirmary, Noah is being like all Dr. ER, right? And Jake helps her walk out to the courtyard where Gray and Creature Wren, Dragon Wren, are waiting. Lilith shows up and Harper is like, you know, I said I loved him. Like, we've done all these things. Like, why is the curse not broken? And Lilith's like, oh, well, if you loved him, it would have broken. Love requires an act of sacrifice. Foreshadowing. So, Gray, she threatens Harper to get Wren to heal because she wanted Wren as her lover, but I guess if she couldn't, she wants him as a beast pet. But he will never listen to her, so she threatens Harper to try and get Wren to heal, right? So Gray offers himself up to Lilith to save Harper and Wren. He's like, take me instead because, you know, I can do things and go places that he can't. So Lilith takes Gray's sword and goes to kill Wren. Harper jumps in the way, gets hit with the sword. Gray stabs Lilith and takes her to DC because he can't kill her in Emberfall because of her magic, but if he takes her to DC, he thinks he can kill her. So when Harper wakes up, she's been out for 6 days, okay? Wren asks if she's in love with him, and she says, I don't know. And Wren's like, ooh, Felonior, and like, who can blame him? Because like, they done been through all this, and girl, you don't know if you love me or not? And she says, but I want to find out, and then grabs his face and kisses him. So then we have the epilogue. And the epilogue, Gray is at home with his mother. When they got to DC, he stabbed Lilith in the neck, and he thinks he killed her, but he don't know because he was afraid if he sat around and waited to see if she died, he wouldn't be able to cross back over because her magic would die with her. So, before he stabbed her in the neck, she hinted that Gray was the true heir. That the king was married before Wren's mother, and that he was the product of that marriage. So he's back home with his mother for all intents and purposes, and he asks, but she doesn't really, so she doesn't tell him, but she doesn't deny it either. So that's pretty telling, right? So he tells her, bury my armor, bury my weapons, don't tell anybody you saw me, to protect her because people are looking for this halfling child, which is Gray, okay? So that's the end, right? And then we get a bonus scene after the epilogue, which is, it's the night of Wren's birthday, the night of the curse. Because we've been thinking this whole time that Gray let Lilith into Wren's bedroom, okay? So in the bonus scene, we see Wren dancing with Lilith at the party, and Gray kind of feels like something's off with this chick, and he says something to Wren, but Wren is like, mind your business, and sends Gray back to his room to guard his empty bedroom. Yeah. So while Gray is there guarding his empty bedroom, Lilith shows up and puts the coin in his hand and like makes a big show of it so everybody sees her pressing a coin in his hand. And basically threatens Gray that like if he doesn't let her in his room, like she's gonna ruin his reputation, right? And then he could lose his position as a guard, which is like a big deal. You know what I'm saying? Because that's like the best gig you can get in the kingdom besides being the king, okay? And so that is the end fin. So that was A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I seriously am gonna roll right into I think it's A Heart So Fierce and Broken is the second book, which I have heard from K Books is amazing. She said the second book is just as good, if not better than the first. So yeah, I'm so excited. So you guys check out Brigid Kemmerer, A Curse So Dark and Lonely. Thanks.